We're speaking from the hall in the middle of the 79th floor of the Empire State Building in Midtown, New York. Around us is more damage than we've seen in New York since tremendous fires before the war. We're between the elevator wells near the top of the building, the 79th floor, where firemen are picking up the debris caused by the crash of a Mitchell B25 bomber into this building right about 40 feet from where we stand. We can't get a closer figure than 40 feet because when the plane hit the outside of the building, it kept on going, and the engines continued about 20 feet into the building and went down the elevator well where they were eventually found. And we understand that one or two of the elevator operators who were on duty at the time, those engines went down the elevator well, were casualties in this tragic accident. Now, before we go further to describe this scene, we're going to talk for a minute with Jeff Smith, who has been here for an hour or so before we got here with our special broadcasting equipment, and who will be able to give us a vivid description of what he saw when he first arrived. Jeff, what were the outstanding things that you saw when you did get here?
Well, approaching the scene, the main thing noticeable was the number of fire engines and the number of ambulances in the street. Policemen and nurses and medical men handling the injured. I understand there were about 10 seriously injured people. About 10 seriously injured people removed from the building shortly after the plane struck.
Then casualties will reach several score. We can't predict them accurately at this early date, but right over here in the corner, in fact, we can see from where we're broadcasting 11 bodies that have been placed on desks. I should say what were desks. They were burned also, and the bodies were. None of these bodies have been identified, with a possible exception of two which have shreds of military uniforms and which were pretty badly cut up and obviously were members of the plane's crew. The rest of the bodies are those of workers in the Catholic Welfare Office here on the 79th floor and in offices on the southwest corner of the building, which went through some of the worst fire. Now, speaking of the fire, all these walls on this floor are completely blackened with oil smoke coming, of course, from the tanks of the plane. Many fixtures have been melted down. All the paint has been melted down. Metal has been melted down. Plastic handles of files are melted. The walls are still hot. The brick and stone walls that we have our hand on as we talk are still hot with the flame that has been out for over an hour now. These warped fixtures are the things that impress you most, and underneath the debris which these firemen are cleaning up now and police is water above our shoes in some places, which is being swept back and forth. Tremendous amount of debris. It's hard to describe. It is a milk bottle in front of us. There are old bills of these offices. Here's one that I pick up right here beside me, the War Relief Services of the National Catholic Welfare Conference. Shipping instruction, which is all burned and scarred at the edges. And then down through the elevator shaft, what was an elevator shaft, and of course there are several here on the 79th floor, there's the blackened walls of the smoke that we told you about a moment ago. Now, Jeff, you just talked with one gentleman who narrowly escaped being in this Holocaust, didn't you? Do you remember his name? He had to go down for special treatment, but I understand you just did talk with him.
Yes, I talked with Mr. George W. Miles, who I'd hoped to have here before our mutual microphone. He's with the War Relief Services of the National Catholic Welfare Conference here in the Empire State Building. He was supposed to have been in his office at the time the airplane struck, but had gone downstairs. He was coming into the street floor of the building at the time the explosion and crash occurred. Hence, he narrowly missed death in his office simply by being absent from the building for a short time this morning. I also understand that Archbishop Spellman was to have been in the offices of the War Relief services of the National Catholic Welfare Conference this morning, but a conflicting appointment kept him from attending.
Well, it's gratifying that the Archbishop did escape the disaster here. It's interesting that every disaster almost always has following it the stories of potential victims who, by some quirk of circumstance, just missed the accident. And today that very thing happened to Mr. Miles and to Archbishop Spellman. Now, while you were speaking, Jeff, we just poked around the corner here where we're broadcasting and discovered one or two things which may help to give listeners a vivid idea of what this looks like here. Here's a hat, a big, black, wide straw hat that obviously belonged to a secretary in this office over on the southwest corner. And one thing that is remarkable now, and it's hard to get used to as we stand here on the 79th floor, is the fog coming in through the north side of the building. The fog is just belting in, and we can't see the street, and it's coming through the hole, the tremendous, I'd say, 20-foot hole in the wall, which was created by the impact of the plane hitting the building. Over here, just behind us, in what was a rather well-decorated office, is a green carpet that's completely soggy. You walk across it, and it feels rather like a marsh, a wet marsh after a heavy rain. And the phone on this desk, we can see it's extension 7905. Much of it has been completely melted down. The black plastic, coal black material with which it's made has just dripped down off the side of the desk. Now, Jeff, was there anything else that struck you first when you arrived? You did get here before we did, and we'd just like to let you have the microphone for a moment to review and recapitulate on this tragic scene here in the Empire State Building.
Well, as I see it, Paul, and from what I've been able to find out from the fire department, the police department, and the Army, who have been here all morning, the plane struck the north side of the Empire State Building on the 79th floor. It plunged through the wall, leaving a hole about 20 feet long and the height of the floor.
Now, Jeff, excuse me for interrupting your description of what happened when you came. While you've been speaking, I've taken this other microphone over to look at the 80th floor. In fact, I ran upstairs for a minute and just came down. Up here we can see the silver metal of the plane, and we can get a view out of one of the cornice windows of the hole in the building from the outside where this plane went in. You can see aluminum pieces of the plane hanging over, and we can see what we assume to be the tail piece, the rudder piece of the plane, and all we can see for identification is a figure 5, and everything else is burned and broken off. There are big sears and scars all over the building where the wings hit on each side of the tremendous hole in the building, and all above the hole in the building for, as far as we can see up into the fog, the outside of the building is blackened with the smoke of gasoline and oil which was burning. Incidentally, from this vantage point here at the 80th and 79th floor, we can't even see the ground down below on 34th Street. But as we came into the building, we did see pieces of the plane being picked up in the street by police and firemen down there. We understand that there's another escape story, that one of the elevator operators of the shaft down which one of the engines of the bomber went was about to come on duty to relieve the girl operator who was killed in the crash, and just happened to be on the first floor instead of in the elevator when it happened, and thus he escaped also. Now, while we've been standing here, we've noticed one or two people. There was a gentleman here who had been in the elevator when the accident happened, and here he is. What is your name?
Joseph Parryhill.
Joseph Parryhill. And you were in one of the cars?
I was on the 70th floor at the time of the accident.
And
one of the cars.
And just what happened? Was there a tremendous explosion? Did the car
drop? There was a tremendous explosion. The car locked between the 70th and 71st floor.
By a safety device, I
Yes. And the elevator operator dropped it down to the 70th floor, and at that point, I got out my first aid kit and started to work on the
Well, how did you
People
happen
over there cut with glass.
How did you happen to have a first aid kit with you, Joseph?
I always carry one.
Well,
I've carried one for years.
Is that part of your work, or?
No, I handle equipment. I handle farm and industrial equipment.
And you were just a passerby in the elevator. You don't belong here in the building.
Oh, no. I had business here in the building.
Well, how many people did you take care of with your first aid equipment?
I had seven. I had two on the 70th floor, and I had 5 up on the 72nd.
Were they pretty badly hurt?
Just bad cuts.
And that was from flying glass in the offices, or?
2 were cut in the offices. Others, I don't know where exactly they came from. They came from up above, from the upper levels, down to the 72nd floor, where we had one corpse. The young fellow there outside the window had been killed on the 72nd floor.
He had been outside the window?
He was found outside the window.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant he was a window cleaner that had been working.
No, I think he tried to escape from the flames and jumped out the window and was caught on the ledge
fell on the parapet. Well, thank you very much. It was very fortunate that you had your first aid equipment with you, and I'm sure you must have been a great help a few moments ago when the accident happened. And now here, right beside us, is an officer from the mounted police who has been here ever since we arrived and whom we understand was one of the witnesses. What's your name, sir?
McClancy, George McClancy.
George, Officer McClancy, were you here when the accident happened, or where were you?
No, I was on the northwest corner of 5th Avenue and 36th Street, and we heard the tremendous roar of the airplane as it was coming over. We looked up in the air and we observed it just missed Salmon Towers at 42nd Street and 5th Avenue. It swerved very low above 37th Street, and it tried to climb. It looked as though it was in quite a deal of trouble.
Did it have flames from one of the engine, or?
No, I didn't notice any flames or any smoke.
Just lost, I suppose.
It seemed to be lost, that's right. The weather wasn't very clear. However, the tower of the Empire State was visible at the time. It struck at the 78th floor with tremendous impact, and the flames swerved all over the top part of the building. And debris started to fall. Glass fell all over 34th Street and 5th Avenue and along 34th between 5th and 6th.
And did you come right in here?
Yes, we came right into the building.
Were you mounted at the time?
No, I'm a member of the Midtown Squad.
Oh, I see. Well, now, thank you very much, Officer McClancy. Are you going to stay on duty here?
Yes,
how many policemen are here, incidentally?
I have no idea. You'll have to have someone up.
Well, we've seen at least 100 on our way up to the 79th floor. And that's the scene as we have witnessed it here on the 79th and 80th floors of the Empire State Building, the scene of today's tragic crash of a Mitchell B25 bomber into the Empire State Building. And as we close our broadcast, we can still smell the smoke which was all over the hallway here and through the elevator wells, and we just happened to put our hand on the wall, which is even too hot still to keep our hand on it. This is Paul Killiam speaking from the Empire State Building and returning you to our studios.